So we'll start the class. We'll go to the as we always do. So this is our first introductory PowerPoint. Tonight's going to be very brief for the most part. We're just going to go through the course outline, all of the things that are elementary to the course itself, most particularly the content, the reading that is required, or the reading materials, and the grading. And again, almost all of you have had me before, so most of this is not going to be much of a surprise. For those of you who I've never taught before, I'm glad to have you as students. I hope you enjoy this experience. I hope you enjoy my style of teaching. I think it works fairly well, at least students tend to think so. And it's a pleasure. I really do enjoy doing this. So even in really nice weather in the middle of the summer. So, and I take that into account. You'll see how I do that. Together with the fact that classes won't, for the most part, be 3 hours in length. I wouldn't impose that upon anybody in this kind of weather. Okay, so let me just go back here for a sec. Before I share the screen, I have to optimize it. Yeah, okay, there we go. I've optimized it, and that's really important because there is a TED Talk that we're going to have at the end of the PowerPoint, and I need to do that for everybody to hear. So if anything ever happens, during the course of a class that you can't hear something or you can't see something, I guarantee you that's more than likely a function of me doing something wrong or not clicking on something appropriately. So please interject. If you speak up, your name will come up on the screen and I'll answer you. Or this is Zoom, so there are there's the opportunity for you to send a note as a chat item, or under the participants button you can raise your hand, and we'll use that a lot when it comes to participation. All right, so let's go through this. All right, so essentially, okay, so again, this is me. So this is my email address. Appointments really aren't on request because, obviously this is all online. But my preferred mode of communication is email. So I'm on my computer all the time. So if you send me an email, I will get back to you relatively quickly. So whether it's a question regarding the course or a very specific issue, things like group presentations, which is something we're going to deal with later. Those kind of raise all kinds of questions about participation and interaction with your classmates, that kind of stuff. So anyway, any questions you have whatsoever, please email me. That's my preferred method of communication, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can, and hopefully with some kind of a satisfactory response. Okay, so I'm going to read this out to you. It's kind of wordy, but it really does encapsulate what this course is all about. So the focus of this course is the operation of the law. Obviously, it's a jury course, and public policy with particular regard to cybercrime, which by its nature involves activity lacking consent to the victims targeted. The field of cybercrime is where public and private institutions, organizations, and individuals are vulnerable to a wide range of actors with sometimes complex motivations. These actors may carry out their actions because they're professionals, criminals, social radicals seeking to advance a cause or ideology, state actors engaged in cyber warfare, or individuals who merely want to see if they can assert themselves over others. Their behavior can cover a wide spectrum from cyberbullying through social engineering, phishing attacks, ransomware, and cyber attacks, and we're going to talk about all of those. All right, so you will have, by the time we finish this course, a really good handle on cybercrime and all the elements that are relevant to it, and things like cyberbullying. We're going to talk about examples that you're probably all pretty much fully already aware. So these are things that are in the news quite often, and very often, every day, there is probably some item in the news that may be relevant to us. And if there is, I will certainly post it for our discussion purposes. All right, so the required materials for the course is this. All right, so it's Cybercrime Awareness, Prevention, and Response. It's a 2020 textbook, so it's really up to date. You can, through the bookstore, and if not through me, you can order a digital copy of the text. So that's certainly cheaper than a hard copy, of which they'll mail to you. So if you need any help in that regard, again, send me an email and I'll help you. But the bookstore has been given the method in order to allow you to buy it online. So which again is going to save you some money. So if you want to do that, please try the bookstore, and if you have any trouble whatsoever, let me know, and I'll assist you. All right. These topics, I'm not going to go through them one by one. They are in your course outline. The course outline is already posted on Moodle. So we no longer use CMS, it's now Moodle. So it's there for you to look at. Most of the content of these PowerPoints I've taken from the course outline. So these are all of the topics that we will cover in the next 6 weeks. Believe it, you know, and I'm sure you'll understand this, these 6 weeks will fly by. They really will. You know, as much as we're going to have 12 classes and try to cover all kinds of material in those 12 classes, things will move at a fairly quick pace, 2 classes per week. 6 weeks does go by quickly. All right, but these are the topics, and again, you'll see these in the course outline. All right, importantly, this is how I'm grading the course. So participation, 20%, in class exercises, which I'll discuss in more particular detail, which are breakout sessions, 20%. There's going to be a midterm exam worth 15, a class or group presentation on our last class worth 20, and a final exam worth 25. All right. So participation, all this basically is saying, and this is particularly true in a class like this, which I consider to be a seminar, and it's particularly because it's an upper year class, 3rd and 4th year. Participation is really important. It's important that you interact with me and you interact with each other. There are going to be very specific parts of the class that involve discussion. So the way I did it in the spring semester, the first time around, and it worked really, really well, I think, is what I will do is I will post a video or a asynchronous lecture that I prepare on Moodle, at least the day before class. So it's something for you to watch. And then the first thing we'll do when we convene for the next class, so for instance, before next Tuesday's class, no later than Monday, I will post something on Moodle for you. It'll be a video for you to watch. And then the first thing we'll do when we start the class on Tuesday is we will in fact start a discussion. And surprisingly, and you know, I'm as new to this as you are with respect to the online teaching, surprisingly and quite nicely, I found that the discussion groups with the class online is really successful. I find that the students, at least in my last class in the spring semester, were really well engaged. And I don't know whether the psychology of that is just simply because you're at home and you're comfortable and you don't have to put up your hand in front of the class. You can just, your name comes up, but that's all that comes up. But having said that, there was a lot of really great participation in the last class, and I'm hoping that we can duplicate that in this class. So that's the first thing we do is we discuss a video. Obviously, it's going to be a video that's relevant to the topic that of the next class, and hopefully, you take advantage of that, because that's the way, in fact, that you get higher grades regarding participation. So in round terms, and this changes up 1 or 2 classes, we should have 12 classes, more or less, but some of them are going to be taken up with midterm exams. There's going to be a film study and what have you. So the 12 may be 10, 11, or 13 or 14, depends on how many things we actually record. But the point is that for each item or each class that I basically record and grade for participation, it's worth 10 points per class. So all of you in the spring semester are familiar with this particular grading. Those of you who've had me before, this is a little bit different because I've elevated the grades. Usually, and this is before all classes went online, participation, which simply means you just have to attend the class, you get 7 out of 10. Well, now in this online format and the different kinds of efforts you have to make to participate, everybody automatically gets an 8 out of 10 for simply coming to this class. So that's an A, right, for this element of your grade. So that's a fairly easy mark to get. And then you ask or answer a question, you'll get 9. And you do more than that, more than once, and you'll get a 10, right? So, and I have no hesitation in giving 10s out of 10s for participation, which is something I usually don't do in the in-person classes. And then at the end of the day, I will take the best 75% whatever the grades are. So for instance, if there are 12 actual grades, then I'll take your best 8. If there are 14, I'll take your best 9 or 10. If there are 10, I'll take your best 7. You guys kind of get that, right? So having said that, so I will basically enhance your final grade by eliminating the lowest 25% of your scores in this regard. All right. In-class exercises. So this is something that, again, has worked really, really well for me and those of you who are in my environmental law class. So these are breakout sessions. So what I also do before the day before the class, and you can see it in your textbook. So at the end of each chapter, there are, in this particular textbook, 6, 7, 8 questions for discussion. I'll pick 5 of those, and I will then post those on Moodle for you to take a look at, the day before the class is undertaken. And then what happens is that during the class, we have, again, the discussion group, then we have the lecture that I give you, and then we'll have a breakout session. And so the breakout session is where I basically put you into groups of 3, 4, or 5, depending on how many students attend that particular class, into 5 separate groups themselves. And you will, amongst yourselves, answer one of the questions that I've assigned to you on the breakout questions. And then after 20 minutes, and that seems to be the time frame that kind of works best, we'll all come back into the classroom, and then each group, each breakout session group, will present their answer to the questions. And the way I tend to look at it is, because I've been very impressed with how this works with you guys, is unless there's something that is totally out of line, and I haven't seen that yet, you'll get a 9 out of 10 for this particular component of your exercising. So that that's that's an A+ for this particular grade. So it works in your favor. And once again, I will, in this particular instance, I will knock off the bottom, again, 25% of the grades for this particular thing. So these are really, the participation and the in-class exercises are really a very efficient way for you to get a really good grade in this class. And that is really my purpose, that you, in fact, do well. All right. There will be class or group presentations that take place. That should have said August 25th. I apologize. It says 15th there on the screen. It's the 25th, and that's what will show up on Moodle. So that's our last class. So I will, in the next couple of weeks, I will put you all into groups, again, of 4 or 5 people, and I will give you a topic. Obviously, the topic will be something to do with cybercrime. And then your purpose will be is to meet as a group over the course of the following 2 or 3 weeks and prepare a presentation to myself and to the rest of the class, because the class and myself grade you on this group presentation with respect to some element of a question of cybercrime. So it may be cyberbullying, it may be phishing, it may be cyber attacks, it may be any number of things that I will assign topics for, right? And that's something we'll do in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but that's there. And again, that's worth 20% of your final grade. Again, I apologize, it's August 25th. All right, so there will be a midterm and a final exam. The midterm and the final exam are both going to be done by way of Google Forms. They're very, very easy to fill out. They're very efficient. I send it to you at the beginning of the exam. You have a fixed amount of time to do it. Midterms tend to be 2 hours, final exams 3 hours. There'll be 50 probably questions of the midterm, 100 on the final. And I just send it to you as a Google form, which means it's emailed to you. It'll be a combination of true and false or multiple choice questions. So the midterm exam will take place on or about July 30th. So that's 2 weeks from tonight. So it'll cover, obviously, probably the first 3 to 4 chapters that we've studied up to that point. And then the final exam will be fixed by the registrar. My best guess will be, since August 25th is the last day of the class, that the final exam will be set for around the 26th or 27th. The registrar will let us know. It's open book, right? So in fact, what you'll do, and again, those of you who've done this with me know this, so the questions themselves will give you the exact page number that the answer can be found on. So again, I wouldn't, and I'll tell you about this as we get close to the exams, I wouldn't rely upon just finding the page number and answering the question without having previously obviously read the material, because it's not something that you can just do off the top of your head. You want to basically know the material first, and then I would think, look on that page if you need confirmation of what you think the answer would be. All right, and again, the midterm exam is worth 15%, the final exam is worth 25%. So do we have any questions whatsoever for anybody? I mean, this is how we're structuring the course. Nothing, we're good? All right, guys, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to watch a TED Talk, all right, on the secret world of cybercrime. Again, this is a very recent kind of TED Talk. It's about 17, 18 minutes in length. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have a bit of a discussion on the content of this TED Talk. And then that's it for our first class. And then we'll move on to next week. All right, guys, so let's watch this and then I'll meet you back here when it's done.
I'd like to invite you to imagine a world in which you are not interrupted during supper by telemarketers.
I'll leave this here.
We'll have to cross our fingers.
I should just give
So just for a little bit of audience participation, you might have to hold up your hand for as much as 30 seconds. How many of you received an email from a Nigerian prince? How many of you received a voicemail saying that you have won a cruise? You didn't? You're left out. You're the only one, though. And I received this just the day before yesterday, I think it was. How many of you received a human calling you and offering you free duct cleaning? Everybody that groaned would have put up their hand, I'm sure. So you were, especially in the case of the third one, contacted by international telecom criminals. So often these are referred to as scams, but in my mind that makes you think about an individual working in their basement, stealing $100 here and there, a clever hoodie-wearing hacker. But these are international, sophisticated groups of sometimes hundreds of people who have multiple tiers of org chart, some of whom are working at almost a call center level, which we'll see some pictures of, who are also working at higher levels of cartel-like infrastructure. When they actually begin these attacks, they don't stop until they get everything you have. So the more vulnerable you are, the more you go for this kind of trick, the more likely it is that they will actually get all of your home equity, all of the balance of your credit card, all of the money in your bank accounts, and then add you to a database that they then sell to other criminals so they can hit you with the next attack. So why does this keep happening? Well, I happen to have a switchboard here for no special reason except to say that there's IT security architecture and telecom security architecture. Large customers pay a lot for IT security architecture, but almost never ask for telecom security architecture. So IT security architecture is very advanced intelligence agency level. Telecom security architecture is somewhere around here. So generally with telecom crime, it follows, there's, as far as I understand, there's 400 different kinds, plus or minus, of telecom crime. So what we talked about earlier, especially the duct cleaning, is called phishing, P-H-I-S-H. And if it's voice phishing, in the case of duct cleaning, it would be called vishing or voice phishing. And there's smishing and all kinds of other things too. So how it starts is a hacker will do one of these techniques. They'll make a virus or a worm or call you or use a fake cell tower to actually intercept your radio coming from your devices. And if you're running things like Internet of Things, so cellular empowered drones or self-driving vehicles or smart televisions or smart fridges or any of these things that might be considered IoT, all of these attacks work even better on those because they don't complain. The attack will hit them, it'll hit them again, it'll go on, right up until somebody gets a bill for $2 million. And $2 million is just an example of somebody that broke into a conference bridge some time ago, a corporate conference bridge. So the hacker gets into the victim, for instance, a company with a conference bridge or somebody with a phone, winds up paying the telco for the fact that they generated a huge amount of traffic, which then gets sub-paid into the hacker. Perhaps the telco doesn't know that they're colluding with criminals. Maybe the telco is in another country where this is actually part of their telco business model, working with criminals. The organized crime is serious. Cybercrime, specifically the IT cybercrime, makes more money than drug trade today in the world. So the individuals that would have invested in drug trade crime now invest in cybercrime. Cybercrime has lots of vendors working in this space, so now they're starting to move into telecom cybercrime, or Cy-Tel crime. You probably can't read the small white writing on this gun, but it's a Desert Eagle. And because of the stealthiness of these attacks, you would never, as a criminal, you would never fire this gun unless there was actually police already trying to arrest you. The point that it's a Desert Eagle is it's a .50 caliber handgun capable of piercing police body armor. So they're assuming that they'll be dealing with SWAT. You may not have seen this logo before, but the thing that may give it away is the Great Wall of China down here at the bottom. Without getting into any kind of political issues. The Chinese government, for the purpose of today's presentation, gave permission for this logo to be in this presentation. And one of the reasons that you might consider telecom crime to be important is they consider this a very, very, very severe issue. Rather than give you some of this fluffy stuff that I've just mentioned, I'll go into a concrete description of one of the largest Cy-Tel stings that has ever happened to date. Recently, thousands or tens of thousands of calls terminated in China. Not everybody reported them, so it took a little while for the Chinese National Police to know that there was actually an attack. Many, many people, thousands in this case, lost all of their money, and in some cases, in the case of older people hit by this kind of crime who lose all of their money in countries that don't have the social safety net of Canada, when they have no money and they're very old, they're faced with living on the street. Well, if they're faced with living on the street, they tend to kill themselves. So the Chinese National Police worked with Chinese Chinese phone companies, and identified these calls were originating from Spain. But national police agencies can't work with the police agencies of other countries unless their legal systems are very similar. So they have to walk through United Nations entities like Interpol or Europol, which is a group that I'm an advisor of through my role. Once they created the formal relationship with the National Police of Spain, the Spanish police identified that in fact the calls were originating from Spanish phone companies and actually were not being bounced through multiple countries. So that led us to believe that the actual crimes were actually originating from Spain. So in working with the phone companies in Spain, it was identified that there was 20 luxury homes. This is a Spanish luxury home, a villa, and they fit a particular profile. So not only is the house physically big, it's on a large lot, meaning that there's a physical distance between the building and the hedge or fence. The hedges are very tall. So what that means is that in these 20 villas in 3 cities within Spain, there was 10 to 20 criminals per house working as members of a criminal call center. It was restricted to the 20 locations. Those individuals, those 10 to 20 people per house, never left. They went in at night, for instance, and never stepped near a window, never went outside. And there was one person only that brought food in and out of this house. So that model, if you think about it, works in Europe, obviously, would probably work in Canada, and maybe is, and would certainly work in any other wealthy neighborhood, because wealthy neighborhoods by their nature have low police presence. So what does this tell you? What does this picture tell you? Well, it tells you at least some of the criminals were tricked into taking this job. They're eating off the floor, they're sleeping on the floor. They're not glamorous, they're not driving Lamborghinis. Out of the many people working in those 20 locations, almost all of them were call center staff. What we would consider very low paid, very low rights sort of positions. if you've been called by duct cleaning, you may have heard somebody in the background, speaking behind the person that was speaking to you. That person that was speaking to you and the person sitting beside them were likely sitting in a call center like this. So these are folding chairs, folding tables, cardboard boxes with soundproofing foam on them, and cell phones. And the cell phones were used so as to hide the fact that they were all physically sitting in one house. Like any call center, they had targets. So hourly, each morning, each day, they were expected to achieve a certain number of dollars in fraud or dollars in lives destroyed. Who is it that does these crimes? Well, as you can imagine, there's certainly higher, more well-paid criminals. Most of the people involved tend to be people that can't get normal jobs. Maybe they have a criminal record that prevents them from getting a normal job. They tend to be almost refugee-like. And certainly in the case of the individuals in all these call centers, once they got on the plane from their home country, the criminal agency that they worked for had no cause to pay them, give them a flight back, would punish them if they spoke to a neighbor or anything similar of that kind. So there is a solution for all of this, luckily. So when we talk about Internet of Things and calls that impact people, there's actually inefficiencies in 4G, landline networks, long distance, and so on. And those inefficiencies actually limit how much fraud can be done. And so they have to rely on things like these physical houses to sit in. Those inefficiencies were one of the ways by which they were traced. So in this particular operation, this international Sitel sting called the Wall, ultimately, through the 3 cities, the 20 locations, the 3 law enforcement agencies, there were 50 Chinese national police involved, 200 Spanish national police involved, and 300 Interpol officers involved that hit all 20 locations, arresting 300 people. Those 300 people all spoke Chinese, and this is one of the reasons that the Chinese national police were involved to function as translators. And they were all then deported. So the inefficiencies in 4G don't exist in 5G. 5G at its highest level is managed by a kind of artificial intelligence called 5GML, or 5G machine learning. And because it's an AI-based system, and it has kind of a bodyguard called a security orchestrator, that security orchestrator, which is very, very rules-based, is supremely good at not only enforcing security rules, like anti-fraud rules, but also preventing new frauds from occurring, as long as it identifies what that common train or chain of value is. So if it says, for instance, one kind of fraud is it originates from one central point and hits many, many targets, that's a one-to-many relationship. Anytime at a telecom level you see a one-to-many relationship, it's quite likely non-human, let's say. So it's likely an automated system. Human in traffic is very, very many-to-many. So it's families talking to each other and trading a variety of different kinds of traffic. A fraud system will be one kind of traffic and will probably be U of 1 at cruise or something similar. So at a telecom level, that's very easily traceable. That's one of the 400 different kinds of fraud that get executed in telecom. But all of the 400 different kinds of fraud were actually invented thousands of years ago. They were actually invented, for the most part, in places like Mesopotamia, where they were used by individuals to cheat grain silos out of other people's grain. So when you execute those artificial intelligence security rules in a 5G machine learning environment, the Forward-Looking Threat Research Group has identified that you can bring this fraud not only down, but you can bring it to zero. You can bring it to zero. So when these frauds are performed and all these people die, it was totally preventable if we had 5G. So I have 2 calls to action. So the one call to action is for everybody in the room that didn't report this crime. So when you received all these different kinds of phishing, when you report them, it goes to the government. The government knows how to allocate funding, how to provide support for law enforcement, and in that way, everybody knows exactly how severe this is. When I was an architect in Telco, I had one specific fishing event, which was U of One cruise years ago, which is still going on today, that was generating 57 million calls a month under one telco. That being the case, I told the federal government over beer one day, and they were very surprised because they only had 3,000 reports. So luckily here in Canada, you can report this to the Canadian Anti-Spam Centre, and they will know exactly how much you care, about this topic. The other call to action is for law enforcement. So national law enforcement, either here in Canada or on YouTube, if YouTube is watching. National law enforcement of any country can approach the Europol EC3 European Cybercrime Center, and through it approach the CITEL working group, which I'm the advisor of, for all the law enforcement and all the telcos in Europe. That being the case, any law enforcement agency, and the Chinese National Police are looking to join this group, even though it's Europol, any national agency can attempt to join this group. And if they do join the group and pass the vetting process, we can then share criminology on all these 400 different types of crime. We can talk about which groups are actually committing the crime, which phone numbers are generating the crime, which kinds of machines generate the crime, and therefore what you can look for at a very low technical signaling kind of level. And we can share all of this detailed kind of information with law enforcement agencies in such a way that we can accelerate the kind of collaboration I described during this sting. One thing I will say is that this is a really misunderstood or a very secret class of crime. It's often misunderstood, it's often downplayed, it's often considered to be a non-issue. Many systems in large-scale companies don't even track it. So the criminals are just walking away with your money and nobody's even complaining. But I hope what I've done through this talk today is done a little bit to demystify this topic. And my hope is that you will share this talk with people you're sitting and having lunch with, people over Christmas, and anybody that might be in law enforcement, telecom, or receive this kind of crime so they know what it is. So thank you.
All right, guys, fair enough. So I have a few comments about that particular TED Talk. Does anybody have any questions or comments they want to share? Now, if those of you who haven't done this before, at the bottom of your screen, there's a participants button. If you go to that, you can raise your hand. So first one is Valerie.
So I actually had fraud happen recently. And I actually called the city police to discuss it. It was a situation in Montreal, so it wasn't that far away. It was within Canada. And they told me that the Montreal police want absolutely nothing to do with it and won't do anything.
Really?
So I don't know how that compares, because he's sitting there saying, report it. But the police here are sitting here saying there's no point.
I'm surprised. I mean, Montreal is a large urban center, so most large urban centers, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, those kind of things, they have units that are dedicated to this kind of thing. I mean, they have fraud units, which have been around for decades, but they have actual cybercrime units. So I'm very surprised. Did you ask them why they wouldn't deal with it?
Yeah, they just said that they've had multiple situations where it's happened and the police don't want to investigate. They don't want to whatever. And what we kind of figured out was that maybe it had something to do with the different law systems, and that they don't want to work with the other department. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, Montreal is in Quebec. Quebec has a civil law system, but the civil law system is every bit as advanced as the common law system in all the other provinces and territories. So, I don't know. I mean, it's something that maybe the RCMP might have looked at, right? They don't often get involved in municipal kind of matters, but again, they have a very sophisticated cybercrime unit. So maybe they were just basically telling you to go do it to somebody else. I don't know. Anyway, thanks, Val. I appreciate the input. Danica?
I'm just shocked that that some of them live like that, and they're tricked into going into that. I thought it was just like a regular job, and then they had their own houses and stuff, not sleeping in those kind of conditions.
Oh, this kind of thing. I mean, we all know this is like human trafficking. This is, people who come from backgrounds where there is essentially they don't have any real substance to live on. They don't have any regular form of income. They maybe don't have much of a roof over their head. These kind of operators will advertise the world basically to people to come and participate in the business, promise them all kinds of things, including a good living and what have you. I mean, this is the flip side of things like human trafficking, where women, for the most part, are recruited into the sex trade with promises of moving to a new country, getting citizenship, and having a great life. So yeah, the fact that they would recruit, if you remember his comment that cybercrime is actually a bigger business than the drug trade, and I'm surprised when he said that. I didn't know that. I'll learn that, as we all will, I guess. Like the drug trade has all kinds of lower level people who are forced into working in it as well. So why would this be any different?
Makes sense. I don't know, it just shocked me for some reason. Whenever I hear, whenever someone calls me now, I'm going to think about that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Carrie? Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Yeah, I was going to say too, always with crimes of that nature, the RCMP is better to call than city police. I know with credit card fraud. One of the things I noticed with the video, they didn't talk at all about the third party aspect. I had actually signed a petition yesterday around the Pornhub, where PayPal no longer is a financial a third party, and they're asking for a Visa and MasterCard because of the crimes against minors and other abuses that are happening in that industry and being sold online. So I'm surprised that there was nothing to say about that financial piece of those transactions, and
yeah, absolutely.
What accountability that the companies that do.
I'm glad to say that, only because I think we're going to find over the course of the next 6 weeks that all of us, to some degree, have seen or know somebody, or families or friends that have been to some degree involved in some kind of cybercrime. And so it's really, I mean, it's a shame that that's happened, but it's cool that we can actually talk about it from an intimate point of view. The only reason that, Carrie, that probably wasn't contained is TED Talks can't be any longer than 18 minutes, right? So that's the rule. So that's as long as anybody's attention span is, apparently. So having said that, the presenter just put in whatever he thought was appropriate to fit that time period. The other thing that was a little bit disturbing about that particular video is that clearly this talk that was recorded for the purpose of the TED Talk was at the tail end of a earlier presentation, because we didn't get any of the details about some kind of a scam dealing with cleaning duck cleaning. He mentioned that a couple of times, and that wasn't anything that we had a background on. So that was kind of unfortunate. But the reason I picked that one is because it's kind of a broad encapsulation of what we're talking about in this course. B, it's a TED Talk, so it's less than 20 minutes. And really importantly, C, it's Canadian, right? And recently Canadian. So I wanted to see, at least I wanted to start off the course with some Canadian content, because this kind of stuff is international to a great degree. So I can't promise you that everything we're going to watch or videos I'm going to post for the purposes of discussions are going to be Canadian, because this kind of thing really does cross boundaries. The use of the internet and the misuse of it, more particularly, is not something that tends to be of a localized nature. But we'll get there. Anybody else? William?
Hello?
Yeah, William, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious. When we look at something like this, where it can be cross boundaries, like globally, if anything is to happen to you in your state, say Canada, but they're based out of, say, China, how does the law play into that? Like, whose law do you play by, ours, or where they're actually at, or is it more of an international law?
That's a really good question. That's a function of international law. And that comes up in not just in this kind of cybercrime environment kind of thing, but it comes up in all kinds of cases where the plaintiff, the person who was harmed, wants to sue somebody for damages, for losses they've incurred, and the defendant may well be in another totally different jurisdiction. In Canada, it could be a different province, or it could be a different country. International law, and we'll talk about this as we go through the course, has a role to play here. The general rule is, and again, it's different from country to country, but the general rule is that you have an action where the harm took place, right? So you would bring an application against whoever caused this harm in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. That's certainly available to you, but the problem, of course, is that you will get a judgment on the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. If the scammers were, say, in Nigeria, right? The fact is that you'd firstly have to serve them in Nigeria to be part of a lawsuit, which isn't necessarily an easy thing, or probably an impossible thing. You could get an order dispensing with service, which is what you'd likely have to do. But even if you went to all that trouble and expense, and trust me, it's a very expensive proposition to do this, even if you got a judgment for $1 million, because that's how much you were scammed, God help you, from a Nigerian scam, a 419 scam, which were very, very famous. Even if you got that kind of thing, what are you going to do with it? Right? You would have to go to, whatever the Superior Court is in Nigeria. You would have to file it with that court system there, presuming, of course, that they have a reciprocity with Canada. I'm not even sure they do. We have to check on that. That's not a hard thing to find out. But if they didn't have reciprocity, then forget it. You're not going to have any option to collect a judgment against anybody in Nigeria. And if they do have reciprocity, it's a function of a statute called the Reciprocal Enforcement of Judgments Act. And it has a schedule of all the countries that Canada basically had reciprocity with. If Nigeria happens beyond that, then what it gives you is the right to take your judgment and file it with the civil law system in Nigeria. And then it gives you the right, as if it was a judgment actually in Nigeria, and the right to collect from whomever the judgment is against. But again, the problem with this kind of thing is we're dealing with people who are sophisticated scammers, right? And we're going to talk about this during the entire course. They're sophisticated, right? And so the chances are highly likely that, they haven't created an entity that has assets that are available for things like judgments, right? So again, if you were that fortunate to have the money and the time to get a judgment in Ontario, B, that you have a reciprocating state, maybe in Nigeria, C, that you register the judgment in Nigeria for enforcement, and then D, find somebody to collect it from. Those are really big hurdles, right? As in, man, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you know that the money is at the end of the rainbow before you start that process. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
And this will apply to all kinds of scams we talk about. Okay, and Carrie, your hand is still up. Do you still have something to say, or is that just from before? Anybody else? All right, I have a question, and this came up in the video. All right, so he talked about 5G networks, right, and how, in fact, advanced they're going to be to basically, with artificial intelligence, eliminate the prospect for a lot of these scams. 5G is in the news a lot these days. Anybody want to share with the class what the latest news is regarding 5G and Canada is? Some of you guys must know this. Anybody?
Hello?
Who's
Are
that?
you talking about like the
William?
conspiracy that it has something to do with COVID? or no?
No 5G. No, I'm not going
Okay.
there. I hadn't
Just
heard
double
that.
checking.
Okay. Anybody? 5G and Canada and China?
Um, it's the theory or fear is that China is using 5G to gather intelligence on other states.
Yeah, exactly. So do you want to give us the background, Carrie, or do you want me to do it?
The little that I do know is the company, what's the cell phone company, the Hi something. They're one of the
Huawei.
first. Yeah, Hawaii. They're one of the first producers, and they're far ahead of the game than any other country is in production of that. So they're the ones basically dispensing it globally, and have most of the contracts. Another side note around that is a lot of the conspiracy theorists are saying that this has so much radiation that it changes the molecules and is physically harmful to human beings and other
Like
life.
you mean just 5G itself?
The 5G itself.
There you go. That's something else. So
Changing. Yeah.
thank you. That's good. Here's the deal, right? So it was in the news today. So Canada is part of what is called the Five Eyes network. Five Eyes being for intelligence purposes. So CSIS in Canada, all the intelligence agencies in Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. We all with what essentially were our allies in the Second World War. So this is pretty much a 75-year-old relationship. Those Five Eyes work together with intelligence sharing. And in very intimate details. And so it's incredibly important that they're all on the same page. What's happened is that while Huawei, which is probably the world's largest basically manufacturer of the 5G network, it has been basically rejected by everybody but Canada now. And it was in the news today because the United Kingdom basically said, no, we're cutting all ties with Huawei. And the reason behind that is what Carrie mentioned, is that the fear is, although Huawei says it's not a state-sponsored company, of course it is. China is a communist country. Everything in China is state-sponsored. The fear is that if a country in the Five Eyes uses Huawei as the 5G provider, that they will have access to our intelligence, our national intelligence information. And the problem with that, of course, is that if one country out of the Five Eyes does that, then it puts at risk all Five Eyes countries, all five of them, because there's such an intimate amount of intelligence sharing. And Canada stands alone at this point in that we have not rejected Huawei. Now, again, this is a part of a story. And again, you guys, I presume, have heard this about an executive of Huawei, the daughter of the president of Huawei, Manjing Hua, whatever her name was, I think was arrested in Vancouver on an extradition warrant from the United States, last year, because they believe that she, in her role with Huawei, basically had done business with Iraq, contrary to an agreement with the United States. And so Canada arrested her on this warrant, and she's currently out on bail, but in Vancouver with an ankle bracelet, waiting for her extradition trial to take place, which may still take years. And when Canada arrested her, within a very quick period of time, China arrested two Canadians in China, Michael Kovic and Michael Spavak, I think their names are, the two Michaels they're called, on spying charges, right? And there's no question that the arrest of the two Canadians was a direct retaliation for us acceding to the United States request to arrest, the executive's daughter in Vancouver. We had no choice as a country. We have an extradition treaty with the United States that, if we ask somebody to arrest somebody in the States who we want to prosecute in Canada, they have no choice but to arrest them. And likewise, we're in the same boat, which is what we did. So we did exactly what we had to do. And there's been lots of publicity about, if we release her, which we could do, as a political part of the process, not judicial, that in fact China would be inclined to release the two Michaels. So that's the story there. But that's Huawei, right? So she's part of Huawei, and so Canada is being really, really reluctant to cut ties with Huawei because, you know, we already have a relatively poor international relationship with China right now. We've got some blockades on I think it's grain or corn or something along those lines. And China is a very big trade partner with Canada, you know, because we can't necessarily rely upon the States in the current political environment that much. And so, you know, Canada has not closed the door on Huawei with respect to anything, but particularly the 5G network. And the real problem is going to be is that if Canada is the only country in the Five Eyes that agrees that Huawei will provide the 5G network, and we'll talk more about 5G during the course, but if we agreed that Huawei is going to be our provider for 5G, we've got a real problem. Like we've got a really, really, really serious problem because we can no longer deal with the CIA or MI6, you know, or ASIO in Australia. These are all the acronyms for the intelligence agencies. CIA is the States, MI6 is the UK, ASIO is for Australia and New Zealand actually. And you know, of course, you know, so if we lose the ability to share information with them, then that cripples us to a great degree because we'll be cut off from that information. And you know, we need that kind of information because you know, there are things like, you know, Russia, who already, you know, it basically looks like they're interfering in Canadian election processes, together with, of course, we already know they did in the U.S., right? So that's the bigger picture for 5G, and so we'll keep that in mind because, you know, there'll be news about this as we go through the course, and I'll bring you guys up to date on it. But it's a really big deal. I mean, while 5G may be a remedy to stop phishing and all kinds of things that we're going to talk about in the course, it's so politically charged that it's not an easy kind of thing to buy into. Any questions about that? Okay. Anybody have any other comments about the video or the course itself? Okay, guys, great. So that's it for tonight. So I'll just tell you, so by no later than Monday, I will post two things on Moodle. I will post a video for us to discuss at the beginning of our class on Tuesday. Tuesday, we'll certainly be dealing with chapter 1 in the textbook. I'm not sure if chapter 2 will be part of that, but I'll certainly let you know. And I will post the breakout session questions. So 5 of them will be on Moodle on Monday. So, you know, for the groups for Tuesday night, you'll know what the questions are going to look like. All right, guys, listen, thank you very much. That's our first class. It's a treat to be doing this with you guys. I appreciate you taking the class with me, and I'll see you all on Tuesday. Good night now.